For professional advice with a personal touch, consult F.L. Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Good evening and welcome to today's Entrepreneur, presented by F.L. Fuller Landau, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. My name is Dan Delmar, along with F.L.'s Josh Miller. Hello, Josh.
Hello, Dan.
And this evening on the program, I always love talking about restaurants. We'll talk to Toufik Kamal of Azar Restaurant.
Azar, Lebanese cuisine. Certainly there's a few of them in town, a few Lebanese restaurants in town. This one's been around over 3 decades. Not too many restaurants like that.
So Toufik is coming up on the way. We'll also get to some entrepreneurial news, and later in the program we'll talk about some HR issues as well with Micheline Maillet.
Change management. It's kind of a bit of a buzzword today in human resource, and as we see and as we listen to each week, Dan, there's always a ton of change that happens every day, every week, every year, and it's how your talent, your people within, help them cope with all the changes that happen on a daily basis.
So we'll start off by talking a bit about that, actually, because we were chatting earlier, and what we thought we'd do is talk about my experience as an entrepreneur. We're past the 5-year mark at Provocateur Communications, and I figured we'd use just the first little segment to chat about how my progress is going as an entrepreneur. I'll ask you some basic questions as someone who's fairly new to the game, and you can maybe give myself and other new entrepreneurs some advice as I make my way through this adventure. So this is
five years already, Dan.
Yeah,
Time
it's
does
past
fly.
five. It's past 5. It's crazy, right? I remember the first couple of years we were doing the show.
Right.
I was just collecting inspiration, really, from all of our entrepreneurs, and we're past the 5-year mark, so it's really exciting. And so that along those lines, I would say that it's tough to retain staff sometimes as a startup, especially when there are a lot of competing for staff against big corporations, people with unlimited funds. In some cases, we're a young company, and sometimes our staff is spread thinly. So how do you manage your talent, and how do you retain your talent as a young startup while sort of preparing your business for growth at the same time? It seems tricky sometimes.
Big question. I mean, there's so many areas and so many things you have to look at. I think the first is the industry that you're in. Are you making widgets? Are you having the same person do the same thing every day? Or are you an accountant that's just kind of adding up numbers? Or are you in the creative field that, you have to, the people that you employ feel they need to be creative. If they're not creative, they're going to burst out of their shell. But that creative side also may have a little bit of instability, or may have always, change management that comes with it. So I think it first depends on the sector you're in. You happen to be in a creative field. It's public relations. It's managing crises, but you have to be creative sometimes in managing it. So in that particular case, I think it's keeping them challenged on a creative basis. I think it's keeping them. I think the feelings will touch home more than a line worker doing the same job, the same widget 1,000 times a day. So I believe they have to feel closer to what they're working on, who they're working with, and that's important. So, do you maintain that closeness with your team? Over the years, have you maintained the closeness with your team?
I like to think so. Last weekend, we had a bit of an outing out in the country. We took all the dogs, all the provocateur dogs, and went on walks, little stuff like that. We'll have drink nights once in a while.
Now, do you do that throughout the year to stay close?
Probably not enough. We should probably try to do the socializing more often.
And I know there's a lot of socializing. Listen, we do it at FL all the time. Certainly socializing. I guess the added benefit, because we're about 100 people now, you're not quite 100 people, is also for the owner, the entrepreneur, to stay on top of it, to kind of sense, to see the body language, to hear the tone, to feel what's going on. Is it been a tougher week or not? If you're 3, 5, 10 people, however, in small businesses, it's easy to keep the pulse on it. It's easy to keep tabs on your talent, on your team. You can see the look in their eyes and their faces. You can hear it in their voices. You feel it in the ambiance. So I think it's up to the entrepreneur to keep their eyes and ears wide open and adjust on the fly. That's I think it's a big aspect. You can try and do that everywhere, but at least if you're all kind of in the same room and the same aspect, that's important. I think in addition to that, the question is how much is it to the bottom line? Do you keep taking on those customers? Do you keep pushing your team to the to the brink, or do you realize and say, hey, you know what? If I take on that extra customer, I'm already swamped. I've got work coming, that's going to keep me going for the next couple of months. Somebody else wants to come on. They want to tag on something new that's due in the next 2-4 weeks, whatever it might be. And you look, and then you have to decide, is it worth taking on that extra job, but possibly losing your talent because they're already stretched too thin, as you said before? And, will they realize it might be too much? Am I going to burn out? So you have to sometimes also balance the dollars and the talent. Are you better off giving up some short-term dollars to keep long-term talent, although you can never know when? Or is that short-term dollars really far more than just the short-term dollars? Is it a key or strategic client? Is it a reputation thing? There's so many things that have to be balanced, but if you can't ignore your team. I'll leave you with I guess, one last thought, and that is entrepreneurs can look at your talent, your team, as either an expense or an asset. Which one how do you want to treat your team? You want to treat them as an expense and all they're doing is costing you? Or you want to treat them as an asset that they're going to help grow your business?
Oh, they're definitely an asset, and they are helping very much.
Then if you treat them that way, and they feel you treat them that way, and it's not just lip service, but it's actually real, tangible events and items and decisions that affect them, and they're included, because there's a lot of talent that like to feel included and explained, and transparency and all that jazz. Then you have a much better chance of keeping them. That being said, rare that people stay long term.
Yeah, it is tough, and we'll ask you more questions as we go forward in the coming weeks, and I'll eventually blog about it when we create our new website and stuff like that. So thanks for the free advice, Josh.
Free advice. Is anything ever really free, Dan?
Let's get to some entrepreneurial news of the week now. HMV Canada, in trouble for a while now. They are going into receivership.
It's one of these. If you don't reinvent yourself enough and you don't get with the times, you're way of the dodo, way of the dinosaur. HMV has been around as long as I can remember it, and but I can't remember the last time I walked into HMV to actually purchase a CD or a video or what have you. Gone in to buy novelty items, gone in to buy T-shirts because they have some cool stuff, but actual video reproduction or music, it's so easy to click a button and get that online that you don't necessarily walk into a store. And I think they've not found the way or the why, as we've said so many times on the show. You need to give the customer a reason why to walk into your store. After so many decades of being in business, they didn't adapt to find the next why to get that customer into their store.
Here's an example of a great business of the moment. Main and Local. They did some promotional items for us here at CJD for our 70th anniversary. I have the big Metro ticket pillow at home. Mm-hmm. Great stuff. Really, really cute, brilliant products. But there's an example of just paying attention to what's hot in the culture and making a business out of it.
There's a lot of people that make money on fads. A lot of people say, better stick to the basic, because if it's a fad, I'm in business one year and I'm out the next, and that's it. Well, you know what? There's room for that too. And if you can catch on to the right fad, I keep using the word fad, but whatever the flavor of the moment is in any particular town or environment or sector, then absolutely you can make a killing, because it's hot and people always want to buy the hot new item, as long as it's not a fortune. They're happy to keep replacing their hot items, they're 10, 20, 50, $100, as long as the items aren't like $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 and it changes in 6 months. You wouldn't want to do that. Now, some of their current product line is cones and traffic signs and all that, so it's not a fad in Montreal. That's going to be here for a really long time.
For sure. Also, the Bank of Canada has some hacking issues, which is causing some concern in the financial sector.
Well, I think this is really a challenge for every entrepreneur. Forget the Bank of Canada. It just happens to be in the news because they're so big and they're so open. They have so many employees. These phishing scams, people are sending emails and with malware attached to them. It's easy to get a personal email to a work business and click before you think about it. Entrepreneurs out there, business owners, team members, just think before you click. You can't put a condom on your mouse, but you know what? You better think twice before you start clicking any email that opens, because it could absolutely, in Bank of Canada, there's obviously sensitive information. I'm sure there's plenty of firewalls, but the reality is, all it takes is one really smart hacker to get in and screw it up. We see ransomware all the time. I've heard 3 stories in the last week about people's data being stolen, encrypted, and held for ransom to get it back. Now, those people didn't have the best backup, so you have to back that stuff up fairly often. But be careful what you click on. check out the behind the scenes. Everything could look great in front of you, but behind the scenes, you better check it every now and then.
You know, I was just telling my dad, whose business had a bit of a hacking issue recently. If you get a weird attachment and you're not sure about it, call the person, ask him, pick up the phone and ask him, did you send this attachment? Are you sending me something? Sometimes it's someone pretending to be a friend of yours.
There's been a lot of requests for money. Mr. Boss says, hey, Mr. Employee, send a transfer to this when he's out of town. Better check and call.
Today's Entrepreneur on CJAD 800. Coming up, we'll talk about food, Lebanese food with Toufik Kamal of Azar Restaurant. That is on the way.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult FL Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Inspiring stories from outstanding business people. Dan Delmar and FL's Josh Miller with you for today's Entrepreneur. And this evening, we're chatting with Toufik Kamal of Azar Restaurant. Welcome to CJD, Toufik.
Gentlemen, good evening. Josh, Dan, thank you for receiving me here tonight. It's an honor to be here and to have this great opportunity.
Thanks. Well, I love talking about food and Lebanese food in particular. Tell us about Azar Restaurant, which has been in NDG now for 3 decades.
3 decades. It's hard to believe sometimes. You know, we came. When was it? It opened in 1984. Was the year that we opened, and we came fresh from Kuwait, where my father was a businessman in the retail industry, selling clothing, and we came here, and he just decided to buy a business, and we moved to NDG. We took a restaurant, and when we took it in 1984, it was a burger joint, fast food joint, and he took
Where was the original location?
The original location, I forgot the address. I'm drawing a blank, but it was on Moncton. If people know NDG area, there's a place called Lucille's.
It wasn't the original Lucille's location.
It was in the original Lucille's location, and back in the days, it was half the size because we used to have a small store right next to us, and it was a used bookstore called Déjà Lu. So we took that spot, we kept it as it is, and, you know, I mean, business was okay, but nothing great. So my father had the idea to convert it into a Lebanese place. I mean, back in those days, we didn't have the diversity of today, right? Anything you opened was just magical. So while we stayed open, he started doing renovations in between shifts at night. One side closed, and then we opened half the restaurant, and so on and so forth.
He was doing his own renovations? Well, with a friend or
with a friend. We hired somebody, and he was sort of participating in the in the renos, but definitely we hired someone to help out, and it took maybe, I think, a month or so. We didn't do major renovations, just give it a bit of a oomph.
Do you know why a restaurant? I mean, it was in retail back then. Why a restaurant in Montreal?
I think it was just the easiest thing he can find that would allow him to deal with the public without necessarily knowing any of the official languages, because when we got there, my father had no knowledge of French and no knowledge of English, and even while he was operating the restaurant, I mean, I'm amazed by how he learned his English. Was by after the lunch rush that you call, he would sit down and talk to customers and ask them, okay, what's this word mean, and what does that word mean, and how do you say that word? And over the years, he learned English, and now he's able to communicate with anybody and talk about anything and be able to understand. So
now, how long did that? Were you at that location, or was Azar at that location for many years?
Started in 1984. We left in 1989. Business grew tremendously once we turned it into a Lebanese Lebanese restaurant. It just exponentially grew to the point where we had to refuse many people, both at the lunch service and at the dinner service. We just couldn't fit them in the place anymore. And so we moved maybe 100 feet next to it. There was a place, a little bit of a bigger place with a nice terrace, a double-deck terrace, and nice spot inside, and we opened there. And if you know NDG, there's Moncton and then there's Harvard. And the first day that we opened, we had a lineup going around the corner street. There were so many people that wanted to go there. I had to close my kitchen at 7 o'clock. I remember that day, 7 o'clock, we had to close. We had no more food left.
That's not always a bad problem to have, but not a good one if you're trying to keep the business going.
On that night, exactly. You're pretty much, we needed to stay open longer, but hey, we're glad it worked out that way anyways.
Now, location is hugely important.
Yeah.
how did your dad find that first location? It was just a business for sale, or he kind of did he scope around town? Because there's been a number of locations over time.
He did. We opened many restaurants over the years. I think we opened a total of 16 to 17 restaurants throughout the years that we've been open. To be honest, I think he just happened to find it by fluke. My father likes to drive around in every part of the city, even if he gets lost at one point. Back in the days, I mean, now he doesn't get lost because he knows the city, but back in then we're still new, so we're driving around. He saw a for rent sign, and so he walked in, he knocked on the door, he negotiated his lease, and there he is. He opened his first restaurant, and it turned out to be an amazing experience because NDG was it still is today, so amazing, and people all over the area still recognize it from 20 years ago.
No question. And so it's interesting because you go from one restaurant to ultimately 16, 17 and back down to one today. So that transition and that kind of growth and back down to one is going to be interesting. When we come back from the break, we'll explore that further.
We're chatting with Toufik Kamal of Azar Restaurant, in business for 30 years on Sherbrooke and Royal in NDG. More with Toufik in just a moment.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult FL Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
We're chatting with Toufik Kamal of Azar Restaurant on Sherbrooke and NDG for over 30 years. Do you remember growing up in the restaurant, and when did you realize that you wanted to make this a career for yourself as well?
Only recently. I started very young because as a young kid, I was excited to go to work with my father. And I remember I was 13 years old and I would wake up super early with my dad. And that was sort of how I earned a bit of pocket money, just to save up and learn how to earn your way around. I didn't really work hard, but I still came around and stuff like that. And I remember that when I was 13, I served my first cup of coffee holding it in two hands, shaking it and just praying I'm not going to drop that cup of coffee. And I had the entire restaurant, all the clients were looking at me and then clapping as I put the coffee down, and as a 13-year-old kid, you're like proud of yourself, even though you look at it today and it's not much. But over the years, I sort of battled the whole restaurant industry. I did not want to be in it. I had a gift for it. I was good with clients. I knew my stuff. I was very knowledgeable. I was able to run a business and so on. It's just I did not want to be in that industry. So I did other stuff. I was in sales and finance and so on. And it's only when I came back from a recent 1-year experience in Abu Dhabi as a consultant in the F&B industry that I realized there's a lot more to this industry that I still need to learn and that I can probably give. And that's when I just sort of started to get into it a little bit more and using it as part of my career.
Working in Abu Dhabi in the food and beverage F&B industry, there must have been some interesting lessons or takeaway from that. Where were you working there?
I was actually an F&B consultant for a sheikh over there. I was in charge of his kitchens. He had 5 kitchens to run and organize and get operating the proper way. And I went there, and that's exactly what I did. What was supposed to be a 1-month contract turned out to be almost a year. They just renewed it, and it was a fantastic experience. And I would think the biggest experience that I'm using today in my daily running of the operation, is how to deal with different backgrounds, different characters, different knowledge, experience, everything. And everybody has a way of doing things, and so you got to learn how to read that out and respond the proper way to get them motivated. Like the last thing you want in this industry is to demotivate somebody, because it's very easy to get demotivated. So you got to work on those qualities and just push them and keep them interested and engaged.
And I guess it's not just with your team employees, it's also with suppliers, it's with customers. I mean, okay, you had maybe a single customer at that point, but probably a pretty demanding one.
Pretty demanding one, indeed. Pretty demanding customer. And I think I learned a lot. I mean, they come from a different lifestyle. They come with a lot of money. So dealing with them is a little bit different. So you got to know how to, you got to know how to put your foot down, but the right way, making it sound like it's their decision as opposed to you're the one who's imposing it on them. So I had to learn how to do that. And today I take that into Azar. And when I deal with, let's say, my customers and how, and I create loyalty and I entertain them as they come and spend whatever it is, an hour or two in our venue, I got to remember that these people worked all week. They put in a lot of hours. Some of them maybe have kids. They're stressed and there's everything. So that hour or two that they're sitting in our restaurant, they don't want to have problems. They just need to be able to enjoy a good time and have good food. And so whatever I've learned, I integrate in my day-to-day operation.
No questions. Lots of lessons you can learn in Abu Dhabi, and I'm sure lots of lessons as as your dad is still around and very hands-on. I'm sure some lessons in there as you look to maybe transition in the future. When we come back from the break, a little bit more about the dynamics of family roles and what you're learning.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult FL Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Welcome back to Today's Entrepreneur, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. My name is Dan Delmar, along with FL's Josh Miller, and we're joined by Toufik Kamal of Azar Restaurant. We'll talk about HR a little later in the program and have Toufik's one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur. But first, chatting a bit more about your background, Toufik, and working for a sheikh in Abu Dhabi, coming back to Montreal to now help out with the family business. What did that experience teach you? And are you maybe not so intimidated by clients anymore after that?
Definitely not. I mean, I was never really intimidated, but that sort of got pushed to the next level, whereby back in the days, if I had to answer a question, I would be very quick on the trigger, if I can use that expression, and I would respond without necessarily thinking it over completely. And sometimes my answers would come out completely wrong or just not the way it should have come out. And today I learned to be a lot more composed, a lot calmer, and I will take the time to ponder on the question that was asked and really think about it, even though it's only 5 seconds or 10 seconds, whatever it is, and then I'll come up with an answer and the answer that should be the right one at that point in time. So
speaking of learning, I mean, this is your dad that started this business. You were there since 13, but really a lot more closer in the last little while. What is that transition like? How is it working with your dad or your parents? And, what have you learned and kind of what are you thinking differently from him going forward?
My dad is pretty amazing. He came to this country and he had a wife and 2 kids to feed. So really he didn't have much time to do anything, right? It's not like he can go to school for 10 years and do something. So he had to do the business to make it happen. He had to, feed us basically and make us live. So, and part of...
So work ethic was huge.
Work ethic was unbelievable. I mean, I think today this is why I have this workaholic attitude whereby I can't stand still. And that got given to me by my father. I just watched him go. And no matter what, no matter how tough things got, up and down, it doesn't matter. He would get up the same time every morning. He would go do his job. And it's just a consistency that was unbelievable on his part. And then he was always hand in hand with my mother. My mother, her name is Samira. They always worked together. They never left each other's side. So if my dad was having
to this day,
my mother is still there. And even, us, the kids, when we got old enough to really be there more often, we really started to participate. Between school and eventual jobs in other fields and whenever we had time to come in and help with the business, we were always involved. So if something else also that he taught us was the unity is, when you work together, it doesn't matter what happens, you will always be able to come on top of things, when you support yourself as a family.
Now, but running the restaurant, the work ethic, I agree 100%, or I understand it. Running the restaurant, living in today's times, certainly with outside forces that are different today than they were 10, 20, 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. Do you have different thoughts, and do you challenge each other on where the business of the restaurant should be going?
Definitely. Definitely. I'd be lying if I said that there wasn't a set of challenges every now and there. But I think that these set of challenges actually push ourselves to, or each other to come out with a solution. And more time than not, that solution happens when we're communicating. So he's more the old school way of running a business. We're very, very much into the printing side of marketing or advertising or bringing the name out there. I'm more into the digital media era, whereby you want a web page, you want to do social media integration, which is today more important than anything else. Everybody's on social media. So I'm trying to sort of slowly take it there, and we don't always necessarily agree on the way that it should be done or on the speed or what's more important than something else. But at the end of the day, we sit down together, and no matter how much in disagreement we can be on certain things, we sit down and we communicate. And at the end of this communication, we understand each other's side, and we find that solution to move forward. So it's beautiful the way it works.
Now, marketing is absolutely huge for any restaurant because people have to know where you are, who you are, what you're serving. Certainly the popularity, your reputation is huge. The marketing that apparently if you were sold out after till 7 o'clock and you didn't have anything, marketing in the 80s wasn't so bad, but getting people to know where you are today and who you are with the amount of competition out there is huge. So is there anything that either has or has not worked for you from a marketing aspect in the last 10, 20 years? Any flops that you would either never go back to or something that you say, I better keep doing that?
You know what? Flyers used to be good. The mailing list where you send flyers to homes
In your neighborhood.
Maybe they worked for a certain period of time. But if most people are like me, when I get that public sack, more often than not,
Toss
it away. And so if a flyer happens to come in there, it's never going to be seen. So it's just money spent for nothing. I think you need to be able to understand how to reach your target, your niche clientele, your target clientele, whether it's Facebook, whether it's the radio, whether it's a mailing list, whatever it is. You need to be able to target these people and know who your clientele is, because once you know who your clientele is, then you're able to target and do a designated advertising for them.
Is the selection of location for you, that must have been also part of a marketing aspect, the neighborhood, foot traffic. How was the selection? You're now Sherbrooke and Royal, as Dan pointed out earlier. How long have you been in this location?
11 years.
11 years. Same size restaurant? Like what has changed? How do you keep getting people walking in the door?
The quality of the product is unbelievable. And people got to really fall in love with my parents. I mean, a lot of people would come into the restaurant and the first thing they do when they walk in is look in the kitchen to see if my parents are there.
Personal touch.
They would come into the kitchen and say thank you to my parents. After the meal is done, the meal was amazing. Thank you so much. It was this family vibe that people loved about it, so they kept coming back, But
the food also has to be pretty good for people to keep going back.
The food was amazing. The food is,
has the menu changed a lot in the third? Okay, it went from burgers to Lebanese. I get that change, but from beyond then, has the menu changed, gotten bigger, smaller over the years?
It got smaller at one point, just because when we got to this location, we sort of tried to size it down. But now, recently, we took on the other shop next to us, so we opened the wall in between us because we had a demand for parties. They wanted space to accommodate 30, 40, 50 people for parties. So we took the next door store when it got available, and because of that, we're now looking at expanding the menu as well, putting in some items that are really fun to have as a group. Maybe not as an individual because there's just too much of it, but as a group, when you're doing the meze, which is the Lebanese version of a tapas, it's really, really fun, you know. And then you have the grillade that comes on the table, and everybody's feasting and sharing food, and the smell of the food, and it's just unbelievable, you know. So we're actually expanding the menu right now, adding more things, and we're even restarting our breakfasts on the weekends, Saturday and Sunday brunch, which I'm working on also getting a DJ for this summer, but that's further down the line, you know.
To be continued on that front.
To be continued.
You're
exactly.
also bring your own wine.
We are bringing our own wine. We are.
Were you always like that? Was that a decision, or is it just this location?
No, it's just this location that we got. Bring your own wine. We even when we first got this location, we had our alcohol. I'm more of the I like to have my own alcohol kind of guy. But you know, you don't really need to fix what's not broken. So the BYOB works very well, and people love the idea of.
Well, certainly it's more on the affordable side. You know, let them come and spend their money on the food that you know that tastes great, whatever. So you 100%. Can put that much love into it. As I see your mom baking in the back,
absolutely,
and let people bring their own.
That's pretty much it.
So what's next? What's next on Azar? You know, it's a great restaurant. It's been there 30 years. You know, you talked about catering. Is there a health side that people are kind of going to want to come to that you feel you have to adapt?
There's branching out into the catering side obviously is very, very big for us that we're looking at. Also doing meal prep is something that I'm looking at for the health enthusiast, you know, or the meathead such as myself.
And that's just getting off the ground. You're just really looking at that now.
Just getting off the ground. I'm looking into it. Nothing is official yet, but it's really getting into it. Yeah.
30 years, 30 years plus.
30 years plus.
33.
Hopefully another 30 years to come.
And hopefully another 33 to come with whoever's in the kitchen.
Well, yeah. We'll decide that in due times, you know.
Exactly.
We'll have Toufik's one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur on the way. And next, Josh, we'll talk about some HR issues.
Yeah, change management. You know, lots of changes happen in entrepreneurial business, any businesses. How do you help your team in dealing with it?
Yeah, we'll be joined by Micheline Maillet, HR consultant at FL. That is next.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult FL Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Inspiring stories from outstanding business people. Dan Delmar and FL's Josh Miller with you. We're joined by Toufik Kamal of Azar Restaurant. His one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur is on the way. But first, chatting with Micheline Maillet, HR consultant at FL. Welcome back, Micheline.
Thank you, Dan.
And so, Josh, some HR issues, especially dealing with change.
Change management, certainly a buzzword, hot topic, but not everybody will know it or understand it. Certainly HR professionals will know it well. Some of the people that are really dealing with talent every day know it, but might not know that it's an actual concept that's really taken to the next level. So, Micheline, maybe you can kind of educate us a little bit on those two small words that make a really big concept, change management.
Sure. So, change management, if you go more traditionally, often there was a big change coming to a company. So the most common one, I would say, mergers, acquisitions, new computer system changes tend to be big changes.
Death of a leader.
Yeah, that could be one. Business transition. So, I mean, you could think of big changes that happen in an organization, but that are generally somewhat predictable. So you know they're coming. So you can plan for it. So a lot of change management theory has been on planning for these changes that are coming. How do you communicate it properly? How do you make sure you've had all your bases covered as far as people's roles are concerned? So it's kind of planning, executing the plan, and then doing a postmortem after to see what could we have done differently, providing support. In today's reality, that theory is almost out the window. So, I mean, there's still big changes that you can plan for, but the reality is that a lot of businesses today are just in constant change.
It's constant flux, and you're not in control of all the factors around you either.
Exactly. So you really have to adapt to things as they come. So it really changes the way that you look at managing change, because you can't really plan for it like you would like to.
So then what do entrepreneurs do? What are the leaders in these businesses? What can they do?
Yeah. There's certain HR practices that you could really adapt to that type of context. So obviously adaptability, flexibility. If we look at communication specifically, in the past, change was coming. You'd write a long memo, maybe a long email, to explain the change and all the impacts. But today it really has to be fast. So you could think of it like a ship. You know what destination you want to get to, but instead of it being on a straight line, you don't know if there's going to be some stopovers or some heavy waves that you have to get through. So really the key is developing trust. I'd say trust is key, because you really need people to say, okay, the boat's getting a bit shaky, there's some water getting in, but we all know where we're going, and I'm aware of what the destination is and how we want to get there.
Earlier in the show, Josh, we were talking about my HR issues and the fact that we do have some turnaround and we're having new people on the team. And so I actually sent that memo today, and I was wondering, how do you craft a memo to not make people feel sad that they're losing a colleague, and at the same time remaining optimistic about the future of the business?
I think it's also it's also managing fear, right? Like, what's going to happen to me?
Yeah, that's why I say a lot of it's about transparency, right? And sometimes in a change, you might not have all the answers right away. So it's not about, often we want to wait till we have all the answers before we communicate, but then we wait and we leave people in this feeling of uncertainty about what's coming next. So you're better off communicating more frequently, but faster. So you could think about blogs, short emails, flash meetings. So people just want to have a feeling of security that there's some kind of plan that's being executed and how they fit into this plan.
So don't always be a perfectionist and write, globs of email or lengthy words just to, really cover the whole thing. Sometimes, and maybe it's a face-to-face thing. Maybe it's not by email. That might be the most efficient.
But you're right. I mean, you can even just look at, media today. A lot of people complain when they read articles online that there's typos in it and stuff like that. But the reality is that people prefer getting their information quickly with maybe a few typos than having to wait, 24 hours for that article to get out. So it's the same thing in internal communications.
So change management is great. Be on it, be active, communicate. Don't worry about it being absolutely perfect.
More on change in a second. Plus, we'll have Toufik's one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur next.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult FL Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Toufik Kamal from Azar Restaurant has his one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur on the way. But first, chatting with Micheline Maillet. Josh, about some HR issues and preparing employees for change.
And entrepreneurs, they have to always change every day. There's no question. There's bullets that fly at them. Whether it's you open up a fine Lebanese restaurant in this block that has nothing, and then there's competition that pops up everywhere. So you really gotta move. And you heard Toufik earlier. Yes, we have to move the times, and we have to kind of bring in maybe another menu or catering or open up another location. But it's also a question of the entrepreneur has to be comfortable in communicating that, not just once a year, once every couple of years, but constantly. So Micheline, maybe you can talk about frequency of communication, or how entrepreneurs can maybe learn to adapt or to talk and communicate a little more often.
If we look at some HR practices that need to be updated in this kind of context, you could talk one about performance management. Traditionally, companies that do performance management have an annual evaluation meeting, maybe two, where they might set objectives for the next year. So really right now the trend is more towards touch points. So you're going to set objectives with the employee, but you're going to probably sit down with them maybe once a month or once every 2 months to see what the status is of the objectives, to sit down with them for their development. Because the reality is when you pull that evaluation out of your folder next year, it's probably out of date. The objectives are maybe not even valid anymore. So it's really much more about ongoing communication. So same thing with employee engagement. You can do an annual employee satisfaction survey. By the time you get all the results, you decide what you want to do. Maybe 6 months to 9 months has gone by, and the issues you've identified are probably not even an issue anymore. The issues have changed. So there's softwares now like Office Vibe where you can actually go and get a pulse of your employee engagement on an ongoing basis.
There's also a question of team cohesiveness. I presume that would also help change management, help if something happens or there's a fork in the road of the company and you go left instead of right. It's one thing if it's one person doing that. When you need the whole team to go in that fork and that whole team has to change, I imagine that team cohesiveness, that team building also should be present at any and every moment.
Yeah, definitely. So it's not just about what you communicate to one individual, but also what you communicate to the whole team so that everybody's on the same page with regards to what's going on.
So would you suggest maybe certain team building experiences, or we were talking with Dan earlier in the program about his talent and how, they at least stay close during the year, and at least they kind of know what they're thinking. So something, if there's a curveball that comes, you're kind of all, maybe not one perfect mindset, but at least you understand each other better so that you can move forward together.
If we look at an entrepreneurial environment, so, typically small, medium-sized businesses, the teams are not so large. So 100%, the ideal is just to talk to your people every day and let them know what's happening. If there's something that has to be done more formal and you want everybody to know, then you can send up a follow-up email so that, if a few people missed it, they're still in the loop. But yeah, it's all about just talking to each other every day about what you're doing. That's the best way to circulate information.
It sounds like it's the old adage: communication, and communication, like location for Toufik and Azar. Thank you very much, Micheline. There's no question. It's really important that entrepreneurs understand their team and how they can absolutely get the best out of them for changes that happen every day in the business world. Thank you. And as we do before the end of the program each week, we'll turn to Toufik Kamal of Azar Fine Lebanese Restaurant and ask you, Toufik, what would be your one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur?
I wasn't too sure exactly where I was going to go with this, and then it sort of just dawned on me, if I can use an expression that goes, the ripest fruit is at the end of the branch. What I mean by that is you really need to understand that success comes from persistence. You're going to fall every now and then. You're going to come to challenges that you may not be able to overcome right away. But if you just keep pushing and believe in what you have to offer in your product, and you have the right surrounding team with you, you're going to be able to succeed. I mean, the best success stories all have failures at some point or another. So just keep doing what you got to do. Just keep pushing and, believe in it, and you'll succeed.
Thank you very much, Toufik. Dan, my little quick takeaway is, you have, there are entrepreneurs out there that are stubborn and think, their way is the only way and that's it. But then you have entrepreneurs like Toufik and many others that we've had on the program that learn from their experiences, that learn from the people around them, and that aren't pig-headed. And I think that learning, that open-mindedness to move to that next direction with somebody else's idea or an experience you got and gained from somewhere else is huge to help the entrepreneurial in his success.
Thank you very much to Toufik Kamal of Azar Restaurant and Micheline Maillet, HR Specialist at FL. Thank you both for joining us tonight.
Thanks.
Thank you for receiving me. It's been a pleasure to me to have met you guys, and Micheline, it's a pleasure to meet you as well.
Thank you.
Next week on the program, Josh, apparently we love Tyler Madison.
I love Tyler Madison. Women's fashion, vegan product, social responsibility, all key themes.
Today's Entrepreneur next Monday at 7 here on CJAD. Have a good night.